Framer for beginners. In this video, you'll learn how to work with positioning, sizing, stacks, and how to structure your website correctly. Stick to the end and don't forget to subscribe because we post every week about Framer. By the way, we'll continue this subject and it's going to be a playlist actually. And if you're a beginner, you definitely need to watch every single video. Without further ado, let's go. Alright, the structure and stacks in Framer work in a way that we have two types, grid and stacks. Each serves a specific purpose, and the main difference is that grid has columns and rows allowing you to automatically size and align your design element. On the other hand, stack is usually like a container where all of your elements needs to be placed to maintain a good structure. Most of our elements are inside a stack, and the foundation of structuring a website in Framer begins with stacks actually. Yeah, let me explain with a real example. Here we have a background space container, that's the name, which has a grid type and all the cards you see are placed inside it. If we remove the layout from this container, it turns into a frame. Typically, frames in Framer don't have the layout option, so it's better to not to use them as a main container. Now, if we add a layout and set it to grid, it automatically sizes and aligns all of our cards based on the setting we provide. For example, if I change the column number to 2, you'll see 2 cards per column. The size and alignments are entirely automatic. Yeah. And you can even have just 1 card per column. As you can see, the cards automatically extend to full width. This type of structure actually is very helpful for responsive designs and ensures stability. The grid systems options determines the number of rows and columns, and the gap options here lets you define the spacing between elements. Additionally, you can set padding for the overall grid to specify the spacing from the top, bottom, left, and right. Keep in mind that padding applies inside the grid container, not outside of it. Usually, this structure is the best choice actually for scenarios where you have cards or a series of elements with consistent size, position, and alignments. It makes responsive design much more easier, and ensures stability. Now let's move on to learning about stacks and their options. For stacks, let me give you a simple example. We'll start by creating 2 frames, and for the parent container, we'll add a layout to manage the child element inside it. Then we'll duplicate the frames we created. You can set the direction to vertical or horizontal to define how the child elements are arranged. With the alignment option, you can align the internal elements to the center, top, or bottom of the container. Alignment moves element vertically, while for horizontal alignment, you can use the distribute option. For example, if we set the distribute option to end, the element will be pushed to the bottom of the container. If we set it to center, they will be centered in the container basically. If we set it to start, they will align to the top of the container. Space between option, considers the entire container space and distributes the elements evenly. If you set it to space around, it automatically adds some spacing on the left and right within the main container. But personally, I've never used space around. It's not that common. It's not very common, but good to know. Yeah. The wrap option is also very useful. If you set it to yes, it doesn't matter what direction is set. If the parent container doesn't have space for the direction, it stacks elements beneath each other. This is especially helpful for responsive design. The gap option defines the spacing between elements. And the padding option allows you to set distance for the top, bottom, left, and right inside the container. This is very important. Now, yeah, let me show how I use stacks in my project with a real example. Here we have a main stack container with some borders and color styles. There's a content stack for managing text elements, and the main stack and the main stack container is for padding, border, and the overall appearance. There's also a title stack, which is used when you want to set specific spacing, such as 8 pixels between the top number and the title, while setting 24 pixels between the description text below. For these kind of spacings, you might create nested stacks. Don't hesitate to do that. All right, let's dive into sizing in Framer. The width and height of these two frames you see here are currently fixed. A fixed size means you can manually assign any size to the element. For example, if you set the size to fill, you'll see that element width extends and fill the available space in its container. It occupies any empty space in the container while respecting the spacing and the next element. If the other frame in the container is also set to fill, both elements will share the available space within the container. Even if the container is resized, the internal elements will automatically resize as well. And if you set the size to relative, you can assign a percentage to define how much of the container's space should occupy. For example, if I set it to 70%, the element will take up 70% of the container's space. Even if you resize the container, the element will still occupy 70% of it. There's another sizing option called fit content. Yep. As the name suggests, if there is content inside, the width or height of the element adjusts automatically to fit the size of the content. Now let's talk about positions in Framer. It might seem a bit tricky at first, but it's really simple once you work with it and get some hands-on experience. Let me show you how positions work if we want to move a frame inside a stack and its position type is set to relative. You won't be able to move it freely. That's because it's bound to the container and behaves according to the container's direction and distribution settings. However, if you set the position to absolute, you can move the frame anywhere inside the container. It's no longer restricted by the parent container's alignment rules. I personally use absolute positioning when I want to add details like color overlays or other design specific elements. However, keep in mind that making an element absolute might requires adjustments for responsive design. This is very important. There are also pins in the position setting that help with responsive alignment. These pins allows you to anchor an element to the top, bottom, left, or right with a specific distance. For instance, if you set a pin 10 pixels from the top, the element will stay 10 pixels away from the top, no matter how the width or height changes. The next position type is fixed, which keeps the element fixed in place, actually. Yeah, regardless of scrolling, no matter how much you scroll, the element will stay exactly where you placed it. Before we move on to the sticky position type, let me show you a real example from one of our designs. For instance, this product section is set to sticky, so when you scroll, it remains in the place until you reach the end of its section. And then the next elements scroll over it, actually. Yeah. In our example, if we make the blue frame sticky and run it, you'll see that nothing happens initially. That's because the parent container's overflow must be set to visible. It's a rule. You have to actually set the overflow to visible. Once we set the parent container's overflow, we run it again. You'll see that the blue frame is now successfully sticky. Alright guys, that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Peace.